Okay, I'm going to get going. If I could have the next slide. So this is what we're going to do today. So this is the welcome. I'm going to introduce you to our fantastic panel today. They're then going to do some presentations, and then we have a chance for you to ask questions of the panel. So this webinar, I'm sure you've been on lots of webinars. The way this one works is you'll see two buttons at the bottom. You'll see a Q&A button. That is where you can ask your questions. So if you have anything that comes out from any of the presentations or just anything you're really interested to know about, pop that in the Q&A. And once the presentations have finished, I will go through and ask those questions on your behalf to the panel. There's also a chat function at the bottom, you'll see. And that is where you can ask if you're having technical difficulties with the webinar, pop it in there. Also, we will be using that throughout the meeting. If people mention any resources, Flora will try and find those and put the links in there so you can access them. And these webinars are recorded and available on our MSc YouTube channel. So next one. So I'll just introduce myself. Probably should have done that right at the start. My name's Claire Owen and I work at the Medical Schools Council, which is a UK-wide organisation representing all of the medical schools in the UK. We have a fantastic panel today. We have Neil Croll from Glasgow Medical School and Richard Oparka, also from Glasgow, is that right?
Dundee.
Dundee, I thought that might be wrong. Yeah, I thought we'd have two schools, not just one. Brilliant. So from Dundee, so different coast of Scotland. So what we're going to be talking about today is why choose medical school in Scotland, an overview of the entry requirements needed to study at Scottish medical schools, and what outreach activities are available for your students who think they might be interested in medicine. So next one. So just a huge thank you to my panelists, and I'm going to hand over to Richard now.
Thank you. I'll just get my presentation up on screen here. Hopefully everyone can see that now. And I'll start the presentation for us if we can find the right button. There we go. So thanks for that introduction. I don't know if I've ever been called fantastic before, but thank you very much. So I am the admissions convener here within Dundee Medical School. I have a pretty short presentation to give you this afternoon. I think largely the function of this sort of meeting and webinar is a bit of Q&A between us. So it's useful to give you the platform to ask us any questions that you might have, and we can certainly try and answer them where we can. So I'm here really representing Scotland in general and all of the Scottish medical schools. I'm not sure entirely where everyone's from on the call. I think there might be some attendees from out with Scotland. So I did feel I had to do my bit for the Scottish Tourism Board and say why Scotland, and Scotland has a lot going for it, obviously. It's quite interesting for me as an admissions convener being asked these questions. So why should you study medicine in Scotland? And I did what I haven't done before, which was ask AI on the internet what answer they would come up with. And the two things they came up with were, one, that there's very established courses here in Scotland. So the universities are some of the oldest in the UK, and certainly some of the medical schools and medical courses are some of the oldest ones within the UK as well. And then the second big factor was that there's a rich medical history within Scotland. So Scotland can lay claim to lots and lots of different medical discoveries. This didn't do my faith in artificial intelligence any good. I'm not convinced these are great arguments for why you should come to Scotland to study medicine in the here and now. So why should you come to Scotland? Well, Scotland is pretty good. There are a number of medical programmes. So we've got several 5-year degree courses in Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow, and St Andrews in addition, all with a long history. If you look at any ranking based on any of the medical schools throughout the UK, Scottish schools tend to punch above their weight. So consistently, Scottish schools, a number of them tend to be within the top 10 rankings. There are a whole number of different rankings available to look at, and I'm pretty sure that most medical schools in Scotland can produce the ranking that they are top in. But consistently across the UK, when there are 43 medical schools, you've got the vast majority of the Scottish schools present within the top 10. The Good University Guide has 4 within the top 10 and 1 within the top 20. So clearly the medical schools in Scotland are held in high regard. and there are more courses coming online. So the traditional St Andrews course, it was a 3-year course, and then students would go on and study somewhere else, but they're about to offer a full 5-year course within St Andrews. Here in Dundee, we share a graduate entry course with St Andrews as well, so it's a 4-year course for those coming from a graduate background. And Edinburgh have begun a healthcare professional course as well. So it's largely distance learning in the first instance for those that are coming from a background somewhere else within healthcare. So Scotland is strong and punches above its weight in terms of medical schools across the country. That being said, the UK is good, and I think it's important to say that actually, and just being honest, quite frankly, that all NBCHB courses in the UK are recognised internationally. We are attractive to international students, and that's the reason why. So, although there is variation between medical schools within the UK, clearly there's a minimum standard maintained, and I think wherever you go to study within the UK, you will have a good educational experience, and we will produce good doctors at the end of the day. There is shared governance from the GMC, and introduced very recently is a shared assessment framework. So all of our students, all of our final year graduates are going to pass and sit the same UK medical licensing exam. So you could argue, in fact, that might narrow the differences between the medical schools in Scotland. But I think there are still some that,
Richard, I'm
yeah,
really sorry. The
that's
slides
okay.
have stopped working, so I don't know which one you're meant to be on, but we're on the first one still.
Well,
Um,
that's okay.
I don't know
Did you
if you,
get?
yeah, yes. If you
You
just
can see
click
that.
down like that, yeah. If you just keep
Right.
clicking down, yeah.
So, what's different about Scotland then in terms of medical courses here? Well, obviously, we're quite heavily informed by a political agenda, and that, in no difference to anywhere else in the world, is supply the workforce. And clearly, from a Scottish point of view, we're talking about specifically the medical workforce within Scotland. With that in mind, the numbers of medical places available in Scotland have increased significantly, approaching 25% since 2015. The numbers expected this year within Scotland, I think, are 1,417 places for medical students. So there's been a massive expansion, really, in the numbers of places available, with a view to supporting the NHS within Scotland, in the hope that some of those graduates, or the vast majority of those graduates, will stay and work within Scotland. Scottish Government are quite honest about specific targets within that. So they're very keen to have a representative and diverse workforce. So we're looking particularly at underrepresented areas, or at least traditionally underrepresented areas. And for Scotland, that really relates to remote and rural areas. So in terms of percentage of people applying to medical school, it's still far less when you look at the Highlands and Islands. And then there are other non-traditional groups, such as the widening access candidates, and Neil's going to talk to that shortly as well. So a lot of work to expand the workforce within Scotland and to try and make it more diverse and inclusive as we go along. So one reason to apply to Scotland is the competition. So clearly this applies to people who are within Scotland at the moment. Scottish Government set our targets, so Scottish applicants are far more likely to gain a place in Scottish medical schools than elsewhere. So the Scottish Funding Council essentially tell all the medical schools in the country what their targets are for different groups. Broadly speaking, that's home Scottish students, students from the rest of the UK, and then further international. And they've got quite specific targets within those groups. And the vast majority of places that we put aside, if you like, are for home Scottish students, and that includes our widening access cohort. Numbers change year on year, but for 2024, the entry number of home Scottish applicants to places almost approached 1-to-1. So that year, if you met the entry requirement for any of the medical schools in Scotland, and they're broadly similar, the likelihood is you would have gained a place somewhere in Scotland. And that's a change for us as medical schools. This year is slightly different, so there are far more applicants this year than last year. But clearly there's a general trend towards the number of places approaching the number of applicants. So if you are Scottish applying to a Scottish medical school, your odds are pretty good. One of the big reasons I think sometimes we shy away from about studying in Scotland and within the regions within Scotland is cost. It's far cheaper cost of living within Scotland and all Scottish cities than the vast majority of the rest of the UK. Clearly, if a student is staying at home, then that's even cheaper. But even moving away from home, but within Scotland, the cost of living is lower here. So that can be a big motivating factor, and I think is becoming increasingly such for mum and dad in particular. It's worth mentioning that at the moment, studying in Scotland for Scottish school graduates is free. That's at the moment, as you can see there. I'm not sure how that will continue or if that will continue, but certainly that is the status quo. One of the big reasons I think it's a good reason to study within Scotland is the broad range of research that's undertaken throughout our medical schools. As well as having highly ranked medical schools from the perspective of their undergraduate courses and their MBCHB courses, they're also quite highly regarded internationally in terms of the research output. And all of the medical schools in Scotland, I think this applies to. So there is annual research evaluation frameworks published where academia is scored against how much grant funding they obtain and what the output of their research is. And all of the Scottish medical schools score consistently high within that. What that means for our students is that they've got access to all of these recent developments, up-to-date technology, cutting edge developments. And then that is represented in our faculty as well. So a lot of the high-flying researchers will teach on our courses. So the information that's communicated to our students is incredibly up to date and often actually more interesting. Particularly in the fields of cancer medicine and surgical techniques, etc. These are things that students like to engage with, and if we have cutting edge researchers for students to learn from, then they do respond to that well. Integrated teaching is a big part of most medical schools now, but all of the medical schools within Scotland have an integrated course. To explain what that means, the traditional medical course was a big, long background of the basic sciences, biochemistry, physiology, and then building on that and working up to seeing patients eventually towards the final years of the course. I think there's a recognition that can be a long haul for students, and actually it can feel abstract. So learning basic sciences in year one, it's hard to see how that applies to real life patients at the end of the day. And I think all of the medical schools have moved to an integrated teaching approach. And one of the things Scottish medical schools certainly have a good reputation for is early clinical exposure. So students within the Scottish medical schools tend to see patients pretty quickly. And they hit the ground running and were highly regarded in terms of graduates from across Scotland in terms of their practical skills. So they're able to hit the ward on day one of being a junior doctor, and they can do the job from a practical point of view. Clearly, postgraduate employment rates are high for doctors, as they are for the rest of the UK, and the same applies within Scotland. Briefly talk about entry requirements, and really with a large caveat, because entry requirements change quite frequently. This is what I have at present down for the medical schools within Scotland. Apologies, don't have St Andrews on there, but it is also 4As and a B at SQA higher, and that's the results I've put up there on the screen just now. There are some nuances and differences in terms of how many sciences are required and whether you require chemistry or biology. And as I said, these can change, these nuances and little details change year upon year. So please do check with the relevant institution's own website. The debate about chemistry and biology rages on in terms of how important it is. I thought it was worth noting that Newcastle have no science requirements at all. And Neil will talk to us shortly about the widening access background. And I think it's an important statement to make that actually 2As and 2Bs is what is required for most widening access courses, so most of the gateway courses. So historically, I think people applying to medicine were those with 5A stars, lots of work experience, lots of experiences, extracurricular experiences and extracurricular success. And we still want those candidates, but we recognise that other candidates from non-traditional backgrounds have a lot to offer in terms of diversifying the workforce, and certainly have the same potential in a lot of cases as all of our other candidates. So two A's and two B's is something else, is another threshold, if you like, to have in mind. Most of the medical schools in Scotland undertake an MMI as part of the assessment process. So the MMI stands for multiple mini interviews. These vary from school to school. Essentially, they are what they say on the tin. So they're a series of very short stations, if you like, and they're an attempt to capture skills other than those that are captured by traditional exams, but you still are desirable in doctors. So that's a range of communication skills, ethical understanding, professionalism, motivation, etc. So things that aren't traditionally picked up just by sitting an exam. I think almost all medical schools now in the UK, but certainly in Scotland, undertake some form of MMI. It's been pretty standard method now for greater than 10 years, so there's reasonable experience of it. And for any of you that are talking to candidates or previously successful or unsuccessful candidates, most of them will have had some experience of an MMI. One question I get asked a lot as an admissions convener is surrounding work experience and personal statements. One thing I would say is work experience is difficult to gain, and we know that. So if a student can't get access to a hospital, to some form of medical work experience, that's okay, and we realise that. What we do look for is some evidence of commitment and social responsibility that's appropriate for their age group, if you like. But certainly we want someone applying to medicine who can show that they're keen to undertake a medical career, and that might be through doing work experience, but it might be volunteering somewhere else. It's important to demonstrate a level of maturity and reflect on the experience that the candidate has gained. But certainly in terms of if a candidate cannot get 1 week's experience in a hospital ward, that doesn't disadvantage them in any way. Similarly, a personal statement, which is often where work experience comes to the fore, I don't think any of the schools specifically score the personal statement. All of the schools look at the personal statement, and for some of them that might inform some discussions around an MMI station, but there certainly isn't any specific scoring of personal statements. So it's not a high stakes part of the submission, the personal statement, but there can often be a lot of anxiety from candidates around that. So I think Scotland is a great place to study. I'm born and bred in Scotland. I love living in Scotland. I like holidaying in Scotland. I'm not really selling Scotland itself here, but selling Scottish medical schools. And as I said, they're of extremely high quality. They're very well regarded nationally and internationally. We've got a great reputation for research within medicine in Scotland, and that's reflected in most of the curricula. And we've got a very good reputation for generating doctors that finish medical school and ready to practice. And I think that is a reassuring thing from my point of view as someone involved in the curriculum. What would I want our medical students to do? I want to be able to walk on a ward with my relatives, myself, or whoever else, and see one of our graduates and know that we're in safe hands. And I'm happy to say that that is what we get. So I'll pause there, I think. And I'll open up for any questions before I pass on to Neil.
I think we'll pass on to Neil. I have
Pass
to
on to
say,
Neil.
I'm convinced that about going to Scotland, though. So
Excellent.
you've done your job for me.
I'm also convinced, Richie. You've done a good job there. Thank you. So no, thanks, Claire. Thanks, Richie. So Claire introduced me earlier. Neil Croll. I am at the University of Glasgow. I suppose I just say I'm the head of widening participation and lifelong learning at the University of Glasgow. So I've been working in this field for a lot of years. Relevant for today, within my remit is oversight for our REACH programme that we run in the west of Scotland. I was involved in setting that up back in 2010. I've worked worked very closely with the medical school at Glasgow since then, and we work across the Reach partnership, all the Scottish universities, as Richie has outlined, Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow, and St Andrews. We all work together in a partnership in terms of running the Reach programme across the country and working with all five of our medical schools in terms of working out widening access to the medical professions. So I'll talk about the Reach programme in a few moments. I'll talk about what the programme does in terms of outreach and talk about how contextualised admissions work and who's eligible to participate in the programme and for those adjusted offers. I'll also mention a few other outreach programmes and resources which exist. Plus, I'll talk a bit about the gateway programs that Richard has also mentioned. But before that, I was going to say a little bit about the application process. Now, Richard's just been speaking about that. I'll just go over that a little bit again and just talk about how we use our widening participation, contextualised admissions as part of that. And as Richard said, there'll be plenty of time to ask questions of us at the end. So to start with the application process, just the first thing to say is to echo what Richard said, that every university has autonomy over its own admissions processes, and they are not all the same. But I'll talk about some of the commonalities which exist for applicants, but for precise detail on a specific university's medical admissions process, do contact that university. And one of the slides that we've got coming up shortly has got the contact details for the medical schools and for the REACH, the Widening Participation Programme teams as well. So what we have done jointly since 2010 is to work together on the admissions process in terms of that widening participation element, and we all use contextualised admissions to try and provide that equity for all at the point of application. So, but just to first of all, some basic commonalities then for all applicants, So, as it says, as you see on the slide there, we all use that early UCAS application date. So that's something that you really very important to remember. 16th of October 2025 this year. We all require hires in S5 and then further advanced hires in S6, and I'll say a little bit about that in a few moments. We all use the UCAT, the University's Clinical Aptitude Test, but it can be used in varying ways. Again, the deadline for that is the 26th of September 2025, so an important deadline for any of your learners who are interested in applying must have the UCAT taken by that date. And as Richard said, we all use interviews, and Richard spoke about MMIs. There are still one or two unis that will use more traditional panels. Glasgow still uses a more sort of traditional panel, two interviewers, but ethical scenarios involved as well. And it can vary between online and in person. Again, contact each university, I think, and if you are offered an interview by a university, the full instructions will be given to you by that university, and feel and do ask the university that you're going for the interview to do ask them for any further instructions. Okay, can we want the next slide, please, Richie? So just that they've got the entry requirements here. Now Richie went over the standard ones. I've also got the widening participation ones here, as I said, each university does have slightly different systems, but we'll all ask for hires by the end of S5, which will vary from 3As and 2Bs up to 5As for the standard, all requiring chemistry and or biology and another science or maths and physics. Again, ask each individual university for the precise details. And as for advanced hires in S6, it will be 2 or 3, usually at a B grade. Now, normally to include chemistry, but this isn't prescriptive because we do all recognise that not all applicants may be able to sit advanced higher chemistry or advanced higher biology and may not be able to sit 2 or 3 advanced hires. So each medical school is willing to offer alternative conditions, which can include further hires if advanced hires can't be taken. So again, if you have any learners that fall within that category, please do contact the universities that they're interested in, and they'll be able to explain what the alternatives could be. As I said, UCAT is used by each university, used in slightly different ways. But no matter how it's used, each university will be looking for applicants to achieve as high a score as possible. And then having the potential then to achieve those grades and, scoring well in the UCAT will normally lead to an invite for interviews, as Richard has mentioned earlier. And, UCAT's personal statements will be read, but decisions won't be solely made on the back of that. Now, that's the standard entry then. The WP entry, wider participation entry requirements, are in the bottom half of the slide. So just to go through those, you can see how they are adjusted in terms of the hires by the end of it. It's 5 instead of the 3 A's and 2 B's to 5 A's. It will vary from 3 A's and a B up to the 3 A's and 2 B's by the end of S5. Again, each university might have a slightly different entry requirement. They will require the same mandatory subjects, so that's one thing that doesn't really change between the standard and the wider participation requirements. So whichever university you're applying to, they'll look for the same mandatory subjects across all applicants. And then we'll still be looking for advanced hires or hires in S6, and that could vary again. It could be BC, it could be 2Bs, it could be 3Bs. Okay. UCAT also asked for looking for the same grade threshold, but the difference here in terms of the adjustment that's made for wider participation applicants is that there could be a 10% addition to the score, or it could, some universities will say it will be a graded addition, so it may vary, it may be more than that, but that's the difference there between the standard and the WP requirements, that there will be that adjustment to the UCAT score. And again, going through that then, should applicants achieving those hires in S5, potential to achieve the S6 grades, doing well enough in the UCAT, should be invited for an interview. We'll go to the next slide, please, Richard. So to talk about the wider participation, we're talking about that. So talking about eligibility criteria then now. First of all, just talking about the REACH program, this is in, but also talking about the learners that would be applicants that would be given, that would be open to get contextualised offers, adjusted offers of entry. So the first thing to say is that the REACH programme works with pupils in all the Scottish state secondary schools. So that's around about 350 secondaries. Now, there are core criteria, which the 5 universities use in terms of core wider participation criteria. So there's the Scottish Index of Multiple Derivation. Now, I think most people know what that is, but just to briefly say that's the sort of Scottish Government Index, which categorises Scotland into, it's about 7,500 postcode areas by the levels of deprivation in those areas. So the WP programmes reach target deciles 1 to 4, and we've got MD20 and MD40. It says on the slide there, SAMD20 deciles 1 to 2, SAMD40 deciles 3 to 4. These are the types of terminology that can be used in terms of describing the different postcode areas. So those 4 deciles are targeted. Then we've got priority groups. Care experienced learners, those that are estranged from family, living without family support, carers, unpaid carers and caring responsibilities, and then forced migrants, asylum seekers, refugees. So those are the core criteria, but very important to say, other criteria are used in terms of targeting for participating in the REACH programme, and also in terms of receiving adjusted offers. Now, these can vary across the universities, but every university has an extenuating circumstances policy, and we will all look at, if somebody's had an illness for a prolonged period that's meant they've missed some school, family bereavements, different life circumstances that may inhibit an applicant achieving the grades in their hires, advanced hires that they would normally have the potential to achieve. And Richard also mentioned right at the very start, remote and rural being a big targeting criterion for medicine, so that is also looked at, and also free school meals in there as well, which is another in terms of low family income. And there are other things as well that we will all look at. If there's individual circumstances, we would ask yourself as advisors, and teachers, advisors, and also the applicants themselves, to put down any circumstance that you think may warrant attention, and that will be looked at by each university and taken into account in terms of the offer that is made. Okay, so going to the next slide, please, Richard. So just to talk about the REACH programme then, so it's been going since 2010, facilitated, as I said, in a partnership with the 5 universities, working with pupils in every school in Scotland, across S4, S5 and S6, so the whole senior phase. Combination of outreach activities and the contextualised admissions, and so that's the programme puts both of those elements together to prepare applicants for applying for a medical degree, to inform them what studying medicine is about, and the type of career options that there can be within a medical career, and then also putting in place, to say, the practical adjustments to the entry requirements that have gone through. The programmes don't run precisely the same in each area, the 5 universities, or rather in slightly different areas, just depending on the context of each area the universities are in. So again, get in touch with the university in your area, and well, as soon as one of your learners is going to register with a programme, or just get in touch with the REACH team. They will let you know exactly what they'll be looking to do with your learners over S4, 5 and S6. So just to talk a little bit about the outreach though that's involved in the programme, as I mentioned, one of the main aims is to introduce pupils to what studying a professional degree is all about, professional degree like medicine, and the career options that are available there. We can provide advice, information, guidance on subject choice in school. Now, obviously, starting work in S4, S5, S6, National 5 options will have been taken by that point, but all the wider participation teams in each university are very happy to be given advice earlier than S4. The programme REACH runs S4, 5, 6, but we're all happy to take inquiries. If you or your learners have got inquiries about sort of National 5 options to take, we're happy to help out with that. Then obviously while REACH is running, we can be advising in terms of higher choices, etc., that will keep a pupil in the running for being able to apply for a medical degree. Support with the UCAS application, personal statement can be provided within the programme. Just say clear that we do not write personal statements, but we will give feedback and advice and guidance on writing them. Okay. And it's worth saying, because Richard mentioned it, and I've kind of mentioned it as well. We won't, no medical school will make a decision solely on the personal statement, but it's a really, really good skill for the pupils to undertake, because it can be the first time that a lot of the pupils are having to actually talk about themselves, sell themselves, think about how, they can reflect on the experience they have and how that would be relevant for a medical degree and a medical career, and that can often then help them when it comes to the interview, in terms of being able to then talk about themselves if they've actually taken time to have to write down the personal statement. So even if we don't use it specifically to make direct decisions, it's a really, really important element for your pupils to undertake. And then interview support we've mentioned there. Part of the REACH programme will often run interview workshops in terms of what the interviews will involve, and that will, as we've mentioned, those can be MMIs, they can be more traditional panels, and whichever REACH programme one of your learners is undertaken, there will be advice and guidance about the different types of interview processes at each medical school. Not all REACH programmes, but some of the programmes do involve completing academic work, which can give a taster of sort of, level 1 work, and all the programmes will involve practical on-campus experience, which is some of the most fun parts that the pupils enjoy doing. Sessions can be delivered in a blended format, so in school, online, on campus. One of the things that we got from COVID, obviously, we had to do little programs online, but we've retained a lot of the online material and resources because they work very well. So we have a nice blend now across the programme and how it's run. And then, really importantly, one of the most important things is, the pupils get an opportunity when they'll come onto the campus to meet medical school staff, meet current medicine undergraduate students, and meeting the students is usually always the best part of all, because people that are 1 or 2 years ahead, similar backgrounds, and that's what I say, that's one of the most valuable parts of the programme. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please, Richard? And then just briefly, I've gone through what the WP entry requirements are, but just to say again that contextualized admissions is linked in as an integral part of the programme. So any of your learners taking part in Reach, participation in that programme and completing the programme successfully will then be used in terms of offer making by the universities across the partnership. Okay, and the adjustments to the hires, to the UCAT, etc. Are that we mentioned already are obviously part of that. And what we've got on the slide here, really important for you all, are the contact details for the medical schools in terms of the admissions teams, and then also the contact details for the Reach teams. So that gets you directly through to the widening participation teams. So that's the contact details for the five universities involved. So that's if any questions for any of the universities, medical schools, WP teams, that's where to go to. Go to the next slide, please, Richard. Now, just to talk about the gateway programmes that we've mentioned. Now, what we've been talking about so far is entry to medicine, the MBCHB degree programme. What we have though now within at least four of the medical schools anyway, Aberdeen, Dundee, Glasgow, St Andrews, all run what are called pre-med or foundation year programmes, all called Gateway to Medicine. The one at Glasgow used to be called GAP, Glasgow Access Programme, but we've called it Gateway now as well, so it's easier for everybody. They just look for what the Gateway programme is when they're applying. Now, it's these programmes are excellent, an excellent route. Targeted again at learners from WP backgrounds, and an excellent route if a learner has not gained the entry requirements to get into Year 1 medicine. Now, Richard mentioned the entry requirements, and that's it there again, 2As and 2Bs by the end of S6, or St Andrews is slightly different, 4Bs by the end of S5, or a couple additional Cs by the end of S6 they're looking for. There are mandatory hires asked for, again, chemistry and or biology, but you can see the difference there in terms of that requirement, 2As and 2Bs by the end of S6 instead of looking for 5 hires, 3As, 2Bs by the end of S5. So it really opens out the opportunities for learners who are really interested in medicine, but for whatever reason not managed to get those hires in S5. It really opens up the opportunity to still follow that pathway. UCAT can be asked for by some, not asked by others. Again, each university will tell you, and there's an interview process used in terms of applying for the Gateway programme. The programmes run for 1 academic year, so that the students are become university students, combination of science and medical content in there, and successful completion, usually achieving a certain grade level across each element of the Gateway programme, can then lead into and achieving those grades and showing sort of the professional experience, etc. Shown that in terms of for going on a medical degree, it will lead then into going into Year 1 medicine. There are also routes into Year 2 science degrees though, so if somebody decides it's not for medicine, not for them, or they don't do quite well enough to get into Year 1 medicine, they've not wasted a year. They then can articulate into Year 2 of a science degree. So really, really good route the Gateway programmes are, and been really successful over recent years running them. Okay, just the next slide, please, Richard. So the last couple of slides are just a couple examples of other outreach programmes, resources that are available, and and there's lots of the thing to say here is there's lots of free to access programmes, resources available, which can be online, in person, can cover all age groups in secondary school. There's student-led programmes, there's resources that have been put together by NHS staff, and the Medical School Council has got excellent resources on its website. So that's all free to access. What I will say is there are other programmes that exist which will ask you to pay for that provision, and they will say, that they've got great success rates. What I would say is don't go to any programs that ask you to pay. There is no evidence that they are any better, and they're not any better than the free resources that have been put together by the other programs. So do not pay for anything. There's plenty free access to program resources available, and we're just going to go through just if there's a few examples on the slides that you can refer to later. But for UCAT, look at the UCAT website because it's packed full of everything you need to know about the UCAT, about the test. There's mock tests you can do there, okay? And then Richard already said that work experience, medical work experience, isn't necessarily asked for now because we know how difficult it is. But if you look on the Medical Schools Council pages, there's really great advice there in terms of and resources and advice and guidance there in terms of the type of work experience that can come in useful, you know, and that can be working in a part-time job. And as Richard said, being able to reflect on how working with the public has given an applicant, you know, the experience that they can bring into a medical profession. We'll just go on to the last slide, Richard, please. And then the last couple of things here to mention, there's a really good one, a really good resource that I've been involved in. Well, I've not put it together, but been involved working with the doctors within NHS, Greater Glasgow and Clyde. Great resource they've got on there. They've got virtual ward rounds. There's day in the life video diaries by different clinicians, different GPs, different specialties, and that group will also run in-person workshops, online webinars, etc. So there's a email address there you can get directly in touch with them as well. So they're really excellent, and they do sessions for earlier years as well. So S1, S2, S3. And Medic Insight we've mentioned. Now there's Medic Insight student-led groups at every university in Scotland. We've got the addresses, the links for the Glasgow and Dundee ones there, but you can get whichever university anybody's looking to go to, there'll be a Medic Insight student-led group there, which also will run week-long programs, which can involve getting into hospitals, getting into GPs, and getting on campus to get on-campus experience. And the final two things at the bottom, just a couple of medical charities that have been set up by doctors using slightly different methods, but you can be a doctor, where there's resources and online they'll run events, etc. In terms of aid and application again for earlier secondary years as well as the senior phase. And the bottom one, Medics and Me, they will pair people up with mentors, people applicants that are wanting to apply. So as I say, all that stuff is free. So have a look at it, see and speak to your learners, let them have a look at all those links. They can have a look and see if they feel that any of those things are for them. But use the free resources. Do not pay for anything. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say. I will hand back to Claire, I think, and take any questions if anybody has.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. One of the things that struck me listening to that and reminded me why I think Scotland is quite different in some ways is the Scottish schools work really well together, and I think there's a real community of practice across the 5 schools in both the widening participation work that they do, but just generally. So I think you can feel that you're part of a medical school community if you choose to go to medical school in Scotland. That's always what strikes me as someone definitely not from Scotland. So we do have a question, and it is about that 5th choice. So we've got 5 medical schools in Scotland. I suppose for a Scottish applicant wanting to stay in Scotland, they need to pick 4 of those, and then they need to come up with a 5th choice. Any advice and guidance around that, Richard?
I mean, the advice has always been and remains that you have a backup choice just in case things don't work out. And I don't think that has changed anymore. So, you go for the 4 medical placements. Generally speaking, these candidates have an interest in science. So have a think about another background science course. You can apply for 5, but it is a risk. It's always difficult. I think one thing to get across is that it's a changing landscape every year upon year, and the numbers of applicants can fluctuate quite frequently. So, you can't base the odds on what happened last year. And I think having that assurance place for another course is important.
But you don't look at what that 5th choice is or make
No.
any inferences. So if someone did put down drama, you wouldn't care.
No.
No. I think
Where,
sometimes
where
people think that you have a little look at it and a little judge, but it's just not true. Neil, go on, please.
that, I'd maybe just add to that, if an applicant is eligible for one of the gateway programs, then they might want to consider, maybe and you might want to consider, well, there's two options there. There's four medical schools and putting the gateway program down, or they might want to think, are there three medical schools they particularly like to go for, then put a gateway program and also have an insurance option, like a
Yeah.
science option that Richard was talking about. So that's kind of different routes that the applicants might want to take. If they're eligible, they've got to check they're eligible for the
Yes.
for the gateway program, so they don't
But
want to waste an option, so.
yeah, definitely those options are precious. Definitely don't waste them. Look carefully at entry requirements to make sure that you're eligible. But I think that's really good advice if you are eligible for the gateway routes to combine those. So someone has asked about if you do happen to be English and have studied in an English school and are drawn to this wonderful education system that you have in Scotland. Do you have any advice for English applicants? I think possibly a little bit harder, Richard.
Yes, and again, it will vary year upon year, but as you can tell, our numbers are regulated by the Scottish Funding Council. So we're told how many students to try and get hold of from out with the UK, from the rest of the UK. So the competition ratios are different, essentially. So for a home Scottish student, there are lots of places. For our UK, there are comparatively less, and for international beyond that, it's smaller still. So the odds ratios of success are less, but similarly, the applicant pool might be less as well. And that's something that I always remind people is that, okay, we might have less places, but it depends how many candidates we have applying from different areas. Traditionally, it is slightly harder to get in from our UK than it would be from Scotland. But we have a good number every year across all of the Scottish medical schools, and it's an important part of everyone's student experience that we have people from as wide an area as we can get.
Neil, anything to add or?
I suppose I would say that anybody who's applying from, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, if they're from one of the priority groups, so from a care experience background, a strange background, carers, Samsung's refugees, do let us know about that, because we will treat applicants, certainly care experience, estranged, carers, we treat them exactly the same if they're coming from, Scotland, England, Wales, or Northern Ireland. We don't target by postcode area, because the targets we have are by Scottish postcodes, but
Yes.
in all the priority groups, then do let us know about that.
And the only caveat to that is that the gateway programs, correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, are aimed at Scots.
They are. Sorry, that's correct. Yes, so that's it. So what we're saying there is, if you're applying to the MBCHB medicine program and you're from one of those groups, absolutely let us know. But yeah, the gateway programs are also just targeted for Scottish applicants. That's correct. Yep.
And we've got a really interesting question here about the numbers or percentages of students who start the course and complete into graduating medicine. Attrition's quite low in medical school. Who wants to go? Yeah, Richard?
Yeah, I can take that one. So as well as admissions convener, I'm year 1 to 3 convener in Dundee, and I've been involved with the course for quite a long time. It's very high. It's shockingly high, and we're quite proud of the fact that actually once we've got someone onto the course, we will do our damnedest to get them through the course. And attrition rates are low. You're talking 1 or 2%, if as high as that, generally speaking, and again very high employment rates. I think all of the medical schools recognise that medicine is a stressful course. University can be stressful, so we all have very good student support facilities available. And whether it's disability adjustments, time that's needed out from the course, we recognise that people take a different journey to get to being a doctor, and we're quite proud of the fact that usually, as I said, 98-99% of our entrants will exit at the other end as doctors.
And Neil, you have similar level of success, don't you, for your widening participation candidates as well?
Absolutely, and I mean it's worth saying, because what Richard's saying is absolutely the case across all the universities. The medicine retention figures are extremely high, and that's not the case with every degree area, you know. So I'm involved in my learning participation hat on in terms of retention success across all degree areas, and the professional degrees like medicine have far higher retention rates. And because I think, as Richard's saying there, there's nice smaller cohorts, very well supported. You know, the medical schools have got really good setups there in terms of, you know, support and advice and guidance. And yeah, the widening participation numbers we've obviously they've increased over the last 15 years running the REACH programme, and particularly introducing the gateway programmes. And the widening participation students are doing as well as all the other students. So it's working. And I think it's fair to say, Richard, that all the medical schools are pretty stringent in terms of evaluation, and we do that. We all work together to see that the programmes are working, because it's very important that we're admitting the right people that are going to be successful. But yeah, the work all students coming in through the programmes are, you know, they're performing as well as the overall student cohort, you know. So it's really encouraging.
Really encouraging. Um, So we've got a question here, and the questioner says, we are seeing a reduction in AH, which I think is advanced hires offering in our local area, and we're worried about the future when it comes to meeting the entry requirements. Is this something that is being considered and discussed? Richard, do you
Yeah,
want to start?
I suspect we can both contribute to this, Neil,
Yeah,
can't we? But
Absolutely.
I think we're aware of that being a problem across the board, and certainly within Scotland, within our admissions group and within the schools, there's a lot of data analysis and reflection on the data to try and ensure that everyone gets. I mean, there is no point in having a widening access ethos and then excluding people because of a factor like you don't have access to the school subject. So there is lots of work actively going on in the background. As Neil said, there's a lot of reflection on whether some of those subject matters are an absolute requirement. So biology, chemistry, particularly at advanced higher. I mentioned that Newcastle are not looking at any science requirements. And certainly that's one option. And clearly we want to work with schools and local authorities to try and ensure that where possible, all the schools have those options available to them.
Neil, do
Yeah.
you want to?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And the thing is, it can be, you know, different types of area, you know, in terms of where somebody's living can still lead to the same lack of access to all, you know, subjects. So you can be in a remote and rural school where there's not a teacher doing advanced higher. You can also be in an inner city school where that can be the case and advanced higher is not being offered. So we all recognise that, and exactly as Richard's saying there, we will all look to see, like, what can a student actually study, and work with the individual students, work with the schools in terms of seeing, right, what is the best subject spread that that student can then do. But nobody will be rejected because they can't access advanced higher chemistry or advanced higher biology. That's absolutely the case, you know.
Brilliant. And I have a question of my own, cheeky. But I'm aware this time of year, so you're finishing off your cycle, you're probably doing interviews at the moment, and probably very lucky to get Richard's time at the moment and Neil's. But you're also thinking about your entry requirements for next year. So as Neil said, we open on the 16th of October for applications. But this is the time when you're sort of reflecting on your entry requirements for next year. Um, you know, what sort of time do you release them at Glasgow and Dundee? And I think I just want to try and you help me reassure people how carefully you think about those entry requirements, Richard.
Um, at the moment, all the time,
Yeah.
both from a data-driven point of view. I'm a pathologist by background, so I like hard, fast facts, basically. We spend a lot of time looking at data, looking at previous years and projections of where we think things might go. I'm also constantly in a state of reflection in terms of what the ethos and ethics behind what we're trying to do are as well. And I think there's very open dialogue between everyone within the school. In terms of it going live, we usually should have all of the requirements when UCAS opens, and I should know when that is, and I don't have the date in front of me.
Start of September, kind of early
Yeah,
September, should it? Yeah. roughly.
Yeah, I don't know the specific date, but at all the individual schools, and again, there's nuances to this, and there things are tweaked and changed, and one of the reasons that they're tweaked and changed is because we're constantly reanalyzing what we're doing, and again thinking about what it is we're actually trying to achieve. So there might be minor tweaks here or there, but certainly by UCAS opening, the published criteria on the websites for all the schools should be accurate by that point.
Yeah.
And medical schools don't change their mind once it's down in paper.
In what sense? As in,
I've heard that actually. I was talking to some friends about their children who are applying for different courses, and actually, things change very near to the sort of application deadline. And I was like, I don't know. Medical schools are really strict on it.
Yeah, we don't flex, and that partly reflects the nature of the career. That if you've published something, you need to honour it, and
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's on us. We don't change the goalposts during the process.
No.
Yeah. And I mean that's kind of reflected by the fact it's the early application date. So, what once somebody's applied to a set of, entry requirements, we don't change it. We can't, we've asked for that. The application's been for those entry requirements. Those are the entry requirements we'll stand by, So yeah, and I suppose just to say, because we spoke about the fifth option, that should stand for, the broader applications as well, and there's always a wee caveat that's put in, that says, because we have to produce our prospectuses, etc., very early in the cycle. We produce them, like say for 2025, we've produced them at the start of 2024. We always have a wee caveat saying something might change, but we will always get those changes done by the start of the UCAS cycle. We won't make a change during that cycle,
Brilliant. Well, that's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed today. Brilliant panel. Thank you so much, Neil. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for people coming along today. We will probably ask you some feedback, and we'll try and share the slides as well if Richard and Neil are happy. I'm going to finish that there with a thank you. It does finish quite brutally, so I'm afraid when Flora pushes the button, we'll all disappear. But so I just wanted to make sure that I said thank you before we do that. But yeah, I'll see you next time.
Thank you.